Okay, so some interesting news that quote unquote dropped the day before we taped this direct. Out of nowhere, AMD has announced that FSR 4.1 is indeed going to be coming to older AMD GPU architectures. The main issue that Radeon users have raised with FSR 4 and 4.1 is that there hasn't been any backwards compatibility support for older GPUs. And this is a real problem, right? Because particularly if you're an owner of an RDNA 3 GPU, you could have bought that last year and you've got no decent upscaling options. But RDNA 3 support, or more specifically Radeon 7000 support, is coming in July. RDNA 2 support is coming early next year, I believe. So there's a phased rollout here. I'm curious if we're going to be getting any kind of explanation for why there was a delay, bearing in mind there was a leaked DLL, which AMD leaked themselves, basically, which means that you could use FSR 4 on any kind of RDNA GPU, apart from RDNA 1. That didn't go so well, if memory serves. Oliver, interesting stuff, right? This phased rollout, and also the fact that there is an in-8 version of FSR 4.0 on, or 4.1 even, on PlayStation 5 Professional. Now, when I was doing my tests of the leaked DLL, the quality wasn't as good as actual FSR using FP8, I believe. However, the PlayStation 5 Pro version of PSSR, which is based on the same algorithms, was actually a very, very good high-quality match almost. I'm wondering whether this delay has actually been to properly optimize for these architectures. What do you think?
Yeah, that's entirely possible, especially when you look at the split between the int8 acceleration on PS5 Pro, which is mooted as 300 tops rather famously, and the int8 acceleration on something like a 7900 XTX, which is off the top of my head like 120 tops or something. So it's substantially lower even for a card in a much higher class. And when you look at something like a 7800, it's down, I think, below 100 tops on that card. So these are much weaker pieces of hardware with respect to their AI acceleration. And like you mentioned, PSSR, obviously the new PSSR fares favorably relative to FSR 4.1. At least it looks pretty similar in a lot of cases. It's pretty a very functionally quite similar upscaler. But as Mark Cerny said, he doesn't think that the math format is particularly important for the algorithm that underpins those two upscalers, so there should not be too much of a difference. To me, it's really just that raw machine learning throughput that's lacking on RDNA 3 cards. Now, RDNA 3 has a totally different machine learning acceleration than PS5 Pro, uses those famous 2 ML accelerators per CU, I believe. But that's obviously not as powerful. On the RDNA 2 side, it's a lot more questionable even still, because there you're really depending on like shader and vector integer paths and not really on, the dedicated machine learning accelerators that are built into RDNA 3. So that's certainly a questionable situation. I think in terms of how well it will work, it really depends on how they can optimize it down and get it to run in that more limited form on these architectures that are not as capable as PS5 Pro in terms of their machine learning acceleration, even at the high end there. We do have evidence from the leaked int8 version of FSR 4 that performance is somewhat wanting on RDNA 3 GPUs and certainly on RDNA 2 GPUs, but it can still be useful, even if the quality is reduced, even if there are some questions about the GPU time that it's taking up, can still be useful, especially on RDNA 3. On RDNA 2, it's a little bit more tenuous. But it's not really clear to me like whether they would try to aim for rough visual parity with FSR 4.1, the standard FP8 version of FSR 4.1, or if they would go for a reduced quality implementation that respected the GPU time that you have there for these machine learning operations. So yeah, I'd be very curious to see that. I also maybe just want to throw this out there. I'm not sure this is kind of a wild card that I hadn't really considered earlier, but came to mind, is the fact that on Xbox, that hardware does have int8 acceleration. It also has int4 acceleration if the data format, could be quantized down to int4, perhaps you get a speed up there. But it's certainly, full RDNA 2 on the Xbox side of things, so conceivably this could end up on Xboxes as well. Who knows? On PlayStation 5, it would be too slow to be at all useful for real time, given the lack of int8 and int4 acceleration there. But it's certainly an interesting prospect that you could see this on a console potentially. I don't know. Obviously, development on Series X is probably not likely to be spurring up too hot in 2027, but if someone wanted to do it, perhaps they could.
Yeah, that was one of the things I actually tested back in my leaked DLL video, which was essentially to use the RX 6700, which is a full RDNA 2 version, essentially, of what the PlayStation 5 GPU is. So therefore, sort of broadly equivalent to what Xbox is doing, and it worked, right? But it did have a significant performance cost, which meant you had to lower the input resolution. But that's kind of okay because the quality kind of holds up, certainly compared to FSR 2 or FSR 3. And I think that's basically what's been irking the AMD Radeon users, is the fact that, they're kind of stuck with, FSR 3 or XESS. And, there's the sort of promised land of something that's actually significantly better that hasn't had an official release. But it looks as though finally it's going to happen. So very excited to see what they do there and the extent to which it may be different from what we've seen already, the extent to which it could have had further optimizations or quality improvements. Curious what you make of this, John. It's kind of good news, right?
I mean, yeah, it's great news in the sense that they're supporting older hardware, older GPUs here that a lot of people are still using. Everything Oliver said, though, definitely raises questions about the performance costs. I mean, I would expect, I don't know, what do you think, 10, 20% performance reduction versus, say, using FSR 3? But I would say that in some cases, depending on the overall performance load, the image quality boost could be worth it. At the moment, it's set for coming to RDNA 3 sometime in the summer, right? Do we have a window on that? But then RDNA 2 based hardware
July.
is later. Next year, possibly.
RDNA 2 is next year, but RDNA 3 should be in a couple of months.
Okay.
Obviously, very curious to see what AMD have come up with there, and it's good news that we are getting that upscaler coming. Got some supporter questions because there are some lingering questions which I think AMD probably should have addressed in their address. I've got this question here from Guntfo. Hell DF! Exclamation point. So there's a missing O there, possibly. Do you think that with FSR 4.1 coming to RDNA 3 that it will also include iGPUs like the ones in AMD Ryzen Z2 Extreme chips? Because they usually have different driver update cycles, and it sometimes takes months to get new drivers. If the performance hit would be the same as FSR 3.1, but with better quality, it would be possible to lower the base resolution and get free performance! Exclamation point. Thanks a lot. I think based on what we've seen with the leaked DLL, unless there's been dramatic performance improvements, essentially what you're doing is looking to trade the lower resolution for better image quality as opposed to higher performance. That's my thought on that. Yeah. The Portugueser asks, hello chaps, FSR 4.1, will we see this on AMD powered handhelds and consoles at some point? Thank you! Exclamation point. So Oliver, that's the thing, right? I mean, in the video, they're directly addressing RDNA 3, RDNA 2, but in the actual PR, they're talking about Radeon 7000 and 6000 GPUs, which doesn't include the iGPUs. Surely, I mean, particularly with Strix Halo and Z2 Extreme, that kind of thing, surely they've got to be supported.
It's certainly suspicious that they haven't been included, but I think that probably comes more down to politics and the logistics of actually shipping those specialized driver versions for different kinds of vendors. And they have been behind at various points. I know that you typically go on the Lenovo website and you're often 6 months behind, 8 months behind the current AMD driver version, which is obviously not very acceptable. I know in some cases you're able to install the AMD driver separately, but you may lose out on certain features that might be included with the driver that is for the Lenovo devices or any other similar device, or the Asus devices, whatever pick your poison there. So I think that is potentially a big issue. Hopefully they do overcome it. I would choose to read that. Maybe this is me being slightly optimistic, but I just choose to read that as them not wanting to commit to a time frame in which their vendor supplied drivers might not be ready, right? They might have to wait a little bit. But I would hope that in the fullness of time they would come to these devices. But I'd also stress, for these devices, the utility of shipping FSR 4.1 is going to be somewhat less than you would see on discrete desktop GPUs.
Yeah, certainly. Based on my testing, and certainly based on RDNA 2 in particular. But there's a lot of people that are using the Leaks DLL with OptiScaler and
Right.
seem quite happy with the results. One of them being Tagan86, who says, "Any idea why it took AMD so long to bring FSR 4 to more cards? And do you think this will be more performant than the leaked version? I've been using the Int 8 version on my Legion Go 2 for months now, and it's great. FSR 4 performance usually has better image quality than FSR 3 quality for the same FPS here." That's kind of the bottom line, isn't it, John? It's like, you're getting that extra quality. You might be paying for it, but if the output resolution image, if the output image quality is good, who really cares?
Yeah, precisely. I mean, that's kind of the point, right? It's like the quality of this is better enough that even lowering the internal resolution, it still produces a better result. Even on a handheld, I would say, where we've had to be very aggressive with cutbacks to resolution. At least on the Steam Deck, for instance, where a lot of modern games require the 200p range, which is pretty extreme. So I'll be curious to test this with something like, say, Tekken 8, which I just barely got working really well on the Steam Deck back in the day. I want to see what we could do with the image quality to slightly improve it, because I think in that case, I forget what it was. There was one specific. No, I think it was using Epic's own internal scaler, or the TSR produced better results than FSR did in that title. But maybe we could flip the script there.
Interesting. July release date for this, John.
Oh yeah.
Do you think possibly there could well be a Steam Machine release in July?
Oh, that's an interesting point. Maybe. I mean, the whole Steam Machine thing's been clogged up by the price increases on components, right? So, but maybe they're finally getting something together. I mean, that would actually be a really smart and interesting timing, right? Is to have this coincide with the release of the Steam Machine, because that would provide that extra bit of image quality that I think would benefit a machine like that. So, good.
Absolutely.
Good
what
point.
do you think, Oliver? It's an interesting conjecture, isn't it?
It's an interesting conjecture. I think at the moment what we're seeing is there's some evidence of shipments of quote unquote, I think, game consoles, according to the shipping documents, arriving in the United States, arriving in various countries potentially. So we think that there are some shipments that are going out. It's not quite clear exactly when those machines will materialize, but presumably Valve is lining up a release, I'd have to assume, in the next few months. If they wanted to hit their quota of the first half of this year, it would have to be by the end of June, which is coming up in about a month and a half. So I don't know what commitment Valve wants to make there, but obviously they have a bit of an uphill battle with pricing. I'm not sure if they've decided on price yet. But I think they do have units out there. I suspect, though, like with the Steam controller, they won't be even close to meeting the demand for these units, no matter what price they set it at. I suspect they'll be running out of stock pretty quick.
I think you're right. It would be great to have a good upscaler out of the box, though. I guess it would need to have some sort of Proton a Linux driver tie-in as well. I think there have been sort of mitigations that have gone into Linux to make FSR 4 work, but an actual proper support from AMD would certainly go a long way. And there's also been those reports of HDMI 2.1 style VRR and even 240 hertz DSC being added to the Linux driver. So things seem to be in motion. Anyway, good news. Excellent news, in fact. I mean, it took long enough, but here we are.